now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the 15-minute show. I'm Adam Keys and I'm here today with Ben Mattinson to discuss Benjamin Sesko. He's been linked to Arsenal for around 18 months. It seems like a transfer that's dragged on forever. We've done phenomenal amounts of groundwork, but let's see if anything actually comes of it. Ben, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks. Yeah, glad to be talking about another player, another fellow Ben as well. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sesko's one that me and you have talked about a lot on different podcasts and different WhatsApp groups and so on. And he's one where the rumours just haven't gone away. It's clear Arsenal very much like him. We went hard for him last summer. He chose to stay at Leipzig, and it was probably the right choice for him at the time. However, given how our season played out, he probably would have got a hell of a lot of minutes for us and probably really kicked on at Arsenal. So, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. He didn't see the minutes at the time. A year on, it shows the kind of character he's got. He wanted to focus on his own development in his career. He would have got more money at Arsenal, and he chose to stay and focus on himself, which that in itself is a good sign. But just a bit about who Sesko is before we get into it. So he's 21 years old. He is Slovenian, very much a centre forward, 6'5", big guy. He's been at Leipzig a couple of seasons. He's been part of the Red Bull group, and he's someone who is on a journey to becoming a big superstar centre forward, very much known for his ball striking, his aerial presence, and his blinding pace that he really kills people with on transition. As I mentioned, he is part of the Red Bull group, so he was at Salzburg. He's gone to Leipzig and he's scored goals at both clubs. But Ben, tell me a bit about just your initial thoughts on Sesko, because he's someone that he hasn't had the kind of scrappy journey to get up the way that someone like Gyokeres has had, or an Ollie Watkins. He's very much had almost that Haaland-like trajectory where he's come through a very refined academy structure and then through to the Red Bull group, which again is a pathway structure.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that it's a really important thing as well, because you see how the education of a player affects how they are in their play style, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what areas. For me, one of the things where I look at why he's a project is because the fact he's been at the Red Bull system. So when you look at how he plays, all of these teams, if anyone knows anything about Red Bull, it's they recruit off a lot of running stats. It's very high intensity football. It's end to end. There'll be a lot. The strikers have to do a lot of sprints. There's a high volume of sprints for a lot of players. Even the midfielders, they're very box to box, cover a lot of ground. So there's a lot there physically. The demands there physically are massive, which is a big bonus. The other side to it is the way they play. There's always going to be space, and he's not someone who he's 6'5", but he's not someone who is used to a lot of physical contact. And sometimes because of that avoids it a little bit, and then other times doesn't use his body like you'd expect for someone of his size. So these are some of the things where I'm like, this is why it's important to think of like where he's been, why he is the player he is because of this footballing education. So from that point of view, that's partly why I'm really annoyed that we didn't get him last year, because this year would have been great for him to develop in a system like this, where he's going to have that. Because now you've had the reason why I'm saying it is if he stays at Leipzig and he has 2-3 more years there, he's not going to improve in that side of his game. So what's the value increase really to us of him having another year or two? Maybe his finishing might improve and on transition how he finishes, but the other side, which we need more, the back to goal stuff, the versus low blocks in the box, aerial ability, aggression in contact, all of that.
Yeah, well, he scored 13 goals in the Bundesliga this season, got 5 assists. He scored 2 penalties, and he has had 66 shots this season. So not a huge amount. If you compare that to Gyokeres, he's at 139. So Sesko's not a player who hits loads of shots. He's a player that, like Gyokeres, can build up a lot of speed. 35 kilometers per hour in the Bundesliga. Gyokeres hit 36 in the Champions League. So two very, very quick players. What's interesting, you've just mentioned about the amount of running that Leipzig do. This is very much echoed in the stats which were provided by the Bundesliga website, that Gyokeres had 875 sprints and 2,064 intensive runs. We know Arsenal ask a lot of their strikers and their attackers in that sense, particularly the left winger, the right eight, and the striker. They all have to do a lot of very intense runs. I actually think our right winger, despite having to track back, probably does the least intensive pressing of the three. And the striker position is one that requires that running. But you mentioned that does generate space for Leipzig, and they do play. They're very, very well known for playing basketball-like games. And you've got players like Javi Simons in there, who's a very good creative carrier. He links very well with Sesko. How do you see that transfer? And because you mentioned Sesko with his back to goal, he is someone for me who likes to get the ball and turn and dribble. He's very good at using his body to feign, but he likes to almost receive in the pocket in that false nine position and go forward, as opposed to hanging on that last defender. You mentioned that 6'5", it's almost like a deceptive profile where people think Sesko, because he's big, he wants to be on the shoulder pinning the defender. But it is the opposite. He wants to get the ball to feet. He's very, very good in the air, but not so much in the aerial challenges in terms of clattering with defenders. So where do you see these stats translating into his actual gameplay, and how that would work if he was to come to Arsenal?
Yeah, I think one of the things I do like about him, you mentioned before with some of the strikers, where Havertz favors the right channel a lot and goes down the right channel. And we need someone who goes to both. But if they're going to favor one, I would say the left, because that left side connection is been not the same for a long time, since it was Gabriel Jesus, Martinelli, Xhaka and Zinchenko on that left side. So that's a bonus, where in terms of him stretching the fence down there, making that run down there, he uses the wings to create space a lot of the time. So when the ball is, let's say we're defending deep and he's the last man, he'll drift out wide to receive the ball wide and then run central, and use all of that space there to get that head start on players a lot of the time. He's got really nice, like, you've seen this a lot. Sometimes you see him receive the ball there. He's got quite quick feet for someone that big, where he will get the ball, kind of spin the defender, and then power into the space. You'll see a lot of that from him. But again, when you think of like the profile, almost forget how tall he is. No, I shouldn't say that, because there is a lot of value in his height, but how he plays a lot of the time in that type of scenario is of a smaller striker who wants to run into space, running behind, and like I said, stretch the defense a lot more. So it's slightly different when you think of someone who's going to chest the ball down and be more of a backboard type. But I think his profile works really nicely with someone like Havertz, or Marino, for example, like another box presence who is good aerially like that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. He won 73 aerial duels this season, which is a lot. He also won 303 tackles, which is pretty insane. So he is a physical player that likes to get stuck in. But I think the physicality that he comes with is different to what most people would assume with a 6'5" player. And that's something that will develop in time, but it's taken that risk. He does rank reasonably highly for the 97th percentile for goals scored with players with over 500 minutes. Touches in the box, he's around the 81st. Shots 62, which is an issue for me, because I think that we are shot shy. We're a team that doesn't take enough shots. This is why I am more inclined to gamble on Gyokeres in some ways. I have talked at length about his red flags, but I like the fact he does shoot. If you could merge the two together, I'd be somewhere in between. But Sesko ranks very highly for defensive actions, 88th percentile, which is very, very high. And if you look at where Opta pulled the data and compare him with other players, they compare him with Strand Larsen in the 23-24 season, for example, Alvaro Morata when he was at Atletico, and players like that. So not quite what you would call true nines. And that in itself is very interesting because he's not in the box to the level that you would maybe expect him to be, although he can attack it very, very effectively. One thing I wanted to ask you about was his touch, because you see all sorts of videos of Sesko, and his touch can look very, very wild and uncontrolled. And then others, you look at it and you think he's like a gazelle. He takes the ball down with such ease and smoothness. And essentially, in one touch, he sets himself up perfectly for his next shot. And it's so smooth, it's almost like it's one singular action.
Yeah, I think one thing I will say with Sesko, if you're buying Sesko, it's the idea of him and what he could become more than anything. I do feel like there's parts where I'm like, there is a lot of a risk there because of the system that he's not used to. And then, for example, people compare him to Haaland all the time. There's a massive differences between the two. I think it's a really lazy comparison because, like, there's similarities, of course, but there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, he's just like Haaland." You see how Haaland's got goals there, and how would it here? Haaland on transition. I saw him from when he was young. So there was a funny situation. He was on the verge of signing for Leeds, so I randomly came across him. And then I looked into him when he was at Molde, I believe. And then when he was at Salzburg as well, and then Dortmund and whatever. But all of those places, he always had that level of inevitability on transition. When the ball was in behind, it's a goal. He had that from young. Whereas Sesko, when he's got more time to think in 1v1s, he doesn't give me confidence. That's one of my differences with him, and I think all of the other people that we're going to talk about, they've got a lot more. They're a lot better in 1v1s. But Sesko's got more of a maverick shooter type, where if he's from distance, he'll just have a go. Like, I mean, you look at some of the goals where the distances of those 3 goals outside the box, like, we have no one in our team that would even dare to do that. So he's got more of that unpredictability when he shoots, but the volume of shots is not good enough at all. We would be looking for someone who's, your 4+ shots per game. Then you have to think, is it with the team? Is that a problem? Because the difference with him compared to a Gyokeres is the Leipzig haven't been very good this year at all. They've massively underperformed. They've had some of the players you mentioned, like Simmons, who are great. He's been injured at times, or they've got a lot of players that they brought in who were like young project type players that could become very good, but too many projects, it's not a good idea. It's not Football Manager, it's real life. You've got to have experience as well if you want to perform well. So yeah, that's another thing to consider. But he does have, one game I did really like of his is when they went against Madrid, not this season, last season. Him and Simmons, both really eye-catching performances. Sesko wasted a lot of chances, but if you look at the problems he created in that game, constantly running in behind, and the shots that he created for himself, that's like the idea of him. And you think, if you can get that and better finishing over time when he refines that, then that could be a scary player.
Yeah, well, 13 goals from 68 shots. It's interesting. He shoots a lot from outside the box, and only 3 have gone in this season. He is one of those players, his shot map is from all over the park, and it's why you will see such a range of spectacular goals. He's had, in my opinion, a fairly good season. I don't know how much he's kicked on from last year overall in terms of people think he's become a lot more refined. I think he's become a bit more mature, but not necessarily as refined as I thought he would have become after another 12 months. So in terms of a big transfer fee, I would be reluctant to pay it. I think around what Gyokeres is costing is fair for Sesko, but it's one of those where we have to wait and see. I have my doubts about how quickly he can settle in, but at the same time, even with those doubts, I think he makes us a better team. You mentioned about not having players that can score the kind of goals he can. I think that's very true. And this is where I think the transitional threat I've mentioned before about the 1v1 in the Euros last year against Portugal, and everyone thought he looked exhausted when he ran through. But if you look at Sesko in 1v1 situations, that's actually more of the norm. And whenever I saw it, I thought he's exhausted. I actually did the Football Vision pod with Phil Costa after that game. And my thinking was he's exhausted. It was like 1:10 on the clock. He just needed to come off the park. Actually, when I've watched him this season, his 1v1 finishing isn't composed. It's not there. It's erratic. It's more similar to Havertz than it is to Haaland, basically. And I think people aren't quite ready for that conversation because they see the big shots, the big powerhouse finishing. But when you compare Sesko to some of the other players around Europe, he does not rank higher than anyone for goals, but he does have very high shot accuracy, which is much higher than Watkins, Gyokeres, Isak, or Ekitike. He also wins a much higher number of aerial duels, and he's won 70. If you compare that to Gyokeres, he's only actually won 4. He won 4. They were in the Champions League. So he is very much a project. The question is, given the fees quoted for Benjamin Sesko, would you roll the dice on him, and what is the maximum you would pay for him?
Yeah, so the thing here with the price is I still look at him as a project. He's not complete at all for what we need and how we play. There's a lot of areas you've got to work on. Even the aerial stuff, he's good aerially, but at the same time, he lacks some of that aggression that you see in the most aerially dominant players. When you think of, let's say, like Gabriel, for example, he's got that thing. It's almost like you're dunking on a player. Like there's a inevitability of him, the ball coming in, and it's landing on his head, and he's going to score. He's not quite got that yet. He can definitely create that. He's a freak athlete. Like the leap he can get at times is ridiculous, and people speak about his hang time and whatever stuff. Like he's, and also that type of Ibrahimovic thing where he can get his leg up really high as well. These are all really positive things, and it could create a player who could be 100 million plus, but he's not that yet. So the price should reflect that. It should be just 60 to 70 million, I think. 70 is a bit of a push, but I think generally that's probably what he's going to end up costing. I think, yeah, there's areas that I'm like, there's a lot to work on. The one thing I would say is if we're going to be the team that are crossing the ball in a lot, you've got a lot higher ceiling aerially for someone like him than, let's say, Gyokeres. So there's that argument that he suits our style more in more areas of his game. But he's not as ready now, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I personally would, but it have to be for the right price. And the condition is then, if you're getting someone who's more of a project, someone somewhere else has to be like ready to go now. Like the left winger, they've got to be a big name, you know?
100%. No, I couldn't agree more. I absolutely agree on that one. For me, Sesko, someone, you mentioned the idea of Sesko. And the longer it's gone on, the more I question whether I really want Sesko or I want the idea of Sesko, especially the more I dig into him. And I also think, am I projecting what I want now to what he is in 2 years' time? But we'll leave it there, Ben. Massive thanks for running through everything. Always great to have your insight. Please drop Ben a follow at Ben_Mattinson_. And if you've enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe and pay attention, because we will be back again very soon with another episode. Next time, we will be looking at Ollie Watkins. Have a great day. Thank you.